Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. We are here at Swaggle Distribution, where all we do is ship comic books. I'd like to introduce you to Dev right here. Dev is our #1 employee at Swaggle Distribution. Dev, how are those boxes coming along? Good to know. Feels like we're making progress. As you can see, Dev never takes a moment off because I lead from the top, and I too never take a moment off because I got a lot of comic books to ship. As you guys can see, Sanity issue #1, written by me. Written by me right there. And I thought it was interesting for today's video to talk about this idea of print count. Something I've had to deal with in doing all of this fulfillment and publishing and distribution, etc. Now, you would think that all of these copies that I'm showing you here are copies that have yet to be boxed up, yet to be shipped, and yet to be put into the consumer's hand. But the reality of all the copies that you're looking at is these are copies that I have actually deemed as being damaged. And as you can see, quite a significant number of the copies that were damaged were the ones that I were calling the 1 in 25s, which is this one right here, the Campion cover, cover C, cover B, the Sean Chen cover, and then of course you have cover A right here. And you'll actually see that based on that stack, a pretty significant amount of copies, I'd say probably about 100 or so, that I've deemed not being worthy of being able to be shipped. Let me show you guys as you kind of get some of these books. Well, perhaps this is a bad example. I don't know why I called this not shippable. Well, okay. Maybe it's just a little bit, got some little spine ticks right there. Non-color breaking. Can you guys see that? Focus is really hard. Well, there you go. So as you can see, some pretty significant corner crunch on this one. So this is one that I deemed unworthy to send to people out there who backed my Kickstarter, especially since that's a 1 in 25 copy. I have some other ones right here that also show a lot of damage. Like this one right here, you can see I went to the lengths to sign this one, thinking that this would be a good copy to see, and then I realized that it had some, color breaking printer tears right there on the corners, as you guys can see. So the point I'm trying to make with this is that in doing this, it hasn't been just as simple as unboxing all of these, comic books, putting them in bags and boards, and then putting them in Gemini mailers to actually just send out to you guys. It's been a whole process, having to actually inspect all of these books and find all of the various flaws. Like I said, all of the various flaws. Well, you get the point. There's some spine ticks on this, right? You see that right there? There we go. Spine ticks, corner crunch, all of the various flaws for these particular comic books that make them unsuitable. So this is something that I thought was really interesting because, one of the big topics in our hobby is the idea of print count and supply, especially in that of the modern comic book market. And I'm going to share some stuff with you guys, be transparent, share some numbers that probably not a lot of people ever really do share with their audiences. And that is this. While this book was advertised as being limited to 250 copies, I would say that in actuality, how many of this book is actually printed? It's probably more in the range of 350, because upon my initial order to fulfill the 250 that I said that there were going to be, I actually ordered 300. But upon delivery, I got at least 30% of those copies came as damaged, like I showed you. A lot of corner crunch, a lot of destruction, etc. So I had the print company send me 50 more copies to compensate for the ones that were actually damaged. And this is a very similar situation to a lot of the other books, a lot of the other variant covers. There's the one that is the Kickstarter exclusive only, this one right here. which is kind of the EC homage. And this one I advertised as being 50 copies only, limited to 50 copies. But in truth, I actually had them print 60 in the event that I got 10 damaged. And I did, in fact, get 10 damaged. So then I complained and had them send me 10 more. So 10 more on the way. So in existence are actually 70 copies of the limited to 50 copies that exist on that Kickstarter. Now, this isn't really such a problem. This is something I think is very, very common in the comic book hobby, in the comic book industry. Damages do happen. Shipments get lost. Replacement copies need to be fulfilled. So it only makes sense that even when certain things are limited print runs and advertised as such, that there's going to be excess copies out there that are going to be needed in order for that vendor to fulfill to the customer. But where this gets a little bit sticky, where this gets a little bit tricky, is once I do fulfill all of these comic books, once I actually do get the print count down to 250, what am I going to do with these extra copies? Because I got to be honest with you. Some of these ones, like I showed you, I had a hard time actually finding, why did I deem this a copy that was unfit for being delivered? I actually don't know. Oh, maybe because it had just a tiny little corner crunch up there. If I get into a situation where, let's just say this book sells out, super, super hot book. Everybody wants the Sean Chen cover, which, by the way, you can get the Sean Chen cover on SweagelhausComics.com. Everybody wants this cover. And I actually get to a point where I do sell out. And here I have another 50 copies just sitting in my living room that, yeah, maybe they have one spine tick on it, but is that really so bad? Should I not fulfill that? And it starts to make you think, well, 50 copies at $20 a pop, I mean, that starts to add up, right? That can actually be $1,000 extra in my pocket. So I, the publisher, I, the vendor, I'm starting to think, well, maybe, no one's really going to know if I put these extra 50 copies onto market. I can go to comic book shows, I can sell them there, I can do that whole thing. And my advertised print count of 250 in all reality is actually 300, but no one's ever going to prove that. I mean, so many of these copies are just going to people that wanted to collect it, wanted to read it. A lot of people that are just supporters of me, family, friends, things like that. And those people are never going to send it into CGC, right? These copies are going to be read one time, thrown in a box, given to children, and never see the collector market ever again. So the reality that you're going to see 300 copies ever make their way on the CGC census where anyone could actually pinpoint, the fact that I overprinted the amount that I advertised, that'll never happen. And for the most part, for most vendors, that'll actually never happen. But the temptation is still there. The temptation is still there to sell that. And I'm sure that there's a lot of vendors and publishers that actually do take advantage of those situations. I mean, we recently had a situation where, at a con, there were creator copies given for 8 billion genies. And Charles Soule actually was able to take a bunch of creator copies to a Comic Con and sell them and sign them. Now, a lot of these creator copies were either exclusive variants or retail variants or variants that, were in theory limited to a certain print count, a certain print run. But yet these creators were actually able to sell them at their own Comic Cons and at their own pop-ups. And it was actually later revealed that creators have the ability to reprint any comic book that they actually really want. I mean, this is true of me too. I'm out here advertising that this comic book right here has a print count of 70 or 50, and I just admitted to you that I printed 70 of them to fulfill. But there's nothing stopping me from hitting up my printer once again and having them print more. No one would ever know the difference. Now, again, this doesn't really matter to me because my comic book is still building an audience. At the current moment in time, there's no one that bought the Cover E exclusive with the actual intent that it was going to get them to the moon. Although, we're going all the way, guys. We're going all the way with this comic book. But that's a side point. The point I'm trying to make is the possibility is there to exceed print counts, and the temptation is there. If I'm being 100% transparent with you guys, the temptation is there. I mean, there's a lot of extra copies here that I could be selling. You know, I'm going to be setting up at Torpedo Con. I'm going to be setting up at San Diego Comic Con. I'm going to be setting up at other Comic Cons. And it would be nice to be able to have all the covers there to present to people that may want to buy them. The temptation is there. But on the flip side of that, the reason why I will never actually cave to that temptation, why I'm actually being transparent with you guys right here, is because it would not be worth it. You know, no matter how much extra little money I could make selling a handful of extra copies above the print count is going to be insignificant compared to the reputation that I want to have for the comic books that I create. If I say that there's only going to be 200 copies or 250 limited copies, I'm going to ensure that 250 copies are the only ones that hit the market. You know, I'm going to fulfill all the other ones. I'm going to get the extras I have, and then I'm going to be left over with damaged ones right here. And at a certain point, you know, this is where a lot of people talk about like, oh, we need like proof of damage videos, or we need CGC to film the destruction of copies. You know, this is a situation I talk about in previous videos about, you know, BTC doing the partnership with CGC and having them do these Superman foils that essentially had numbered 1 through 300, and they were going to destroy all the other ones. And apparently we were supposed to get a video of them actually destroying these comics. We never actually got this video. Of course, we're never actually going to see this video. There's a lot of problems with it. Shout out to Bryce Comics. Bryce Comics did a 1-of-1 Miles Morales variant, you know, and he's supposed to destroy all the other copies. Now, I don't actually know if he released that video. I don't actually think he released that video. I believe that CGC probably did do it. You know, they probably have, you know, shredders at their company. It's not that hard to do it. But I think it does get into these, you know, kind of weird territories where all of a sudden you start to think, well, you know, are they really going to release, you know, this paper waste video? There's going to be some paper waste organization that catches wind of that, and then all of a sudden they're going to protest CGC and say like, oh, you guys are destroying all these trees for no reason. So it's going to be controversial. You're never actually going to have these companies release that type of video, that type of footage. And so I don't really know what the solution is. You know, the transparency of the print counts is definitely a big issue. And even at CGC, you know, let's say Billy over at CGC has the one job that it's like, hey, you got to destroy these other 900 copies of Bry's 1-of-1 Miles Morales cover. And that guy's like, okay, boss, I'll definitely do it. And he takes it over to the shredder, and then he thinks to himself, well, I mean, like, nobody's around. It's, you know, past 5 o'clock. I'm the only one here. Maybe I'll just grab a couple copies just for myself, just to have, because I actually really like this cover. You never really know. I mean, maybe Billy out there totally did that. That's always a possibility. So it's kind of an interesting thing, you know, with the print counts and the transparency. It even goes back to the Lord of the Rings card, you know, the 1-of-1 Lord of the Rings card. Now I'm not here to like speculate, but I do believe that there's only one Lord of the Rings card. But I mean, like, was there not a printer proof that was created of it? You know, like, did they not ensure that actually one was going to be made? You know, did they not have eyeballs on it? Maybe they did 5 test prints to look at it. What happened to those 5 test prints? You know, is there one printer proof copy at Wizards of the Coast that's sitting there? Probably. I mean, you hear a lot about these, like, you know, mythical copies and these mythical variant covers that exist. I've had many people actually tell me firsthand, and I've had firsthand experiences of people talking about certain comic books that we all know of that are very, 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 very popular, you know, that people pay a lot of money for, that I've heard firsthand accounts of creators and publishing companies having variant covers for those very, very popular comic books that are 1-of-1s or special editions or things that like never actually hit the market. And that's something that's really interesting too, you know, because even for me, as I was doing this, as I was making my own comic book, I thought to myself, well, should I have a 1-of-1 copy just for me? I mean, it's you know, I'm already printing it. It's so easy to do it, just to have them be like, oh, let me do a virgin cover. Like, you know, I didn't print any virgin covers, but I could have printed a virgin cover, and it could be the 1-of-1 virgin for my own comic book. So really interesting to think about that. and to talk about this idea of print count transparency and how little there is because of how kind of sketchy it is with the amount of overrun and damaged replacement copies that need to be made, which calls into question, those print counts of 100 aren't actually print counts of 100, including my comic book right here, Sanity Rise of the Occult. Like I said, limited to 250, but there you see a whole stack of comic books that will never hit the market. At least that's what I'm claiming. You guys will never know. What do you guys think about this? Print count, extra copies. I got to get back to shipping. Thanks so much for watching. Transparency is key in comic books, and that's why I'm making this video. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. 9.2, not good enough to fulfill. 9.0s, certainly not good enough to fulfill. 9.0 copies right there. 8.0 copies, definitely not good enough to fulfill. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next video.